Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Mark Bernarducci, Senior MSL, and someone I've known for a very long time. And Mark wanted to come on and share his story and his unconventional background and how it's helped him lead to some great success as an MSL. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hey, Mark, how's it going, buddy? Thank you for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tom. Good morning. It's great to see you again, and looking forward to this podcast format. I've never done a podcast before, so thank you for inviting me.
Well, I couldn't wait to have you. You're the guy. I feel like you were made for this format. Not to take anything away. I'm sure you're great for, face for TV, voice for podcast.
Right. Exactly. We could do this without the video then, right? It's all good. It's all good.
No, it's all good. But no, thanks for joining me. As I mentioned in the intro, I told everybody, we know each other a very long time. We've worked together for many years, and I'm excited to hear you tell your story and give folks advice. So, let's go back to the beginning. I know, you spent a long time getting your education together and getting that all out of the way. So tell everybody how that worked.
Yeah. If we want to go back to the beginning of my education, we might have to go back to when Jesus Christ walked the earth. But
Jesus Christ was in the quad. He was in the quad.
Yeah. Moses was at the homecoming, But in all seriousness, I went through pharmacy school before my dad actually encouraged me to study pharmacy. I went to pharmacy school before the 6-year PharmD. So I got my 5-year Bachelor of Science degree. And a lot of why I chose to do what I did academically had to do with timing. So the time when I graduated with my Bachelor of Science degree, it wasn't so much a timing issue, it was a need issue for me. So obviously the pharmacy curriculum is very scientifically and clinically oriented. There isn't a whole lot of business acumen that is worked into the curriculum, at least at that time when I went through. So I had already made a decision well before I graduated to continue and go on straight on through to next fall into a full-time MBA program back in my home state, New Hampshire, where I could live at home and commute to the university. Excuse me. And if I didn't mention, I went to the University of Rhode Island for my Bachelor of Science degree. And so I thought that was going to be it. And then, that was 2 years, and I decided to do that right after instead of working for a while like some people do, or take a gap year, as they call it now, kind of soak in life a little bit, get some experiences. I didn't want to get used to a certain lifestyle and then have to rip myself away from that lifestyle and be a full-time student again. Then I decided, when I graduated with my MBA from the University of New Hampshire, the momentum for the 6-year PharmD degree to be the entry-level degree had really started to take off. And I thought, using the same mentality of transitioning from my Bachelor of Science to my MBA, I said, why don't I just continue, go and get my Doctor of Pharmacy degree, and then I'll be done. So in that transition from, Bachelor of Science, and I sat for my board, so I got my pharmacy license after my Bachelor of Science, got my MBA. It was more of a timing thing for me to decide to go on for my Doctor of Pharmacy degree, and that's what I did.
So
I went back down to the University of Rhode Island to do that.
So you started out, you got your bachelor's degree in pharmacy, then you went and got an MBA, and then the PharmD program became in vogue. So you went and finished and got your doctorate of pharmacy. Why? What made you get the MBA? Like what kind of drove you to that?
Well, as I had mentioned, there wasn't a whole lot of business acumen worked into the curriculum of the Bachelor of Science degree at the University of Rhode Island, pharmacy. So I knew that I wasn't going to be necessarily a clinician all my life. and I wanted to have the opportunity to branch out. So I wanted to prepare myself with at least the academic background to do that. It was up to me after I get these credentials to apply that background to work and gain the experience that I needed. So getting that MBA actually opened doors for me to start pursuing some at the time, some non-traditional career opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, we're going to continue talking about your path and everything else, but like looking now, knowing what you know now, would you recommend to people to consider an MBA, or do you think that because this is such a science-focused, science-driven environment in medical affairs, that it might not make sense to do? I'm just curious what your advice might be.
It's good question. Good question. So there's a few things here, a few nuggets, if you will. One is there are some advantages to going straight through the academic curriculum like I did without like breaking it up with some relevant work experience. I can tell you that in my graduate programs, MBA and then PharmD, those that had been out in the work world for some time, when I was working in the summers, in retail pharmacy and saving money to pay for the next academic year. But for those who had been out for a while, who decided to go back to school and get their graduate degree, they came with a fresh, with an interesting perspective and kind of a real world perspective that they could contribute during the class discussions.
Yeah.
Both in the MBA and PharmD. As far as what type of degree to get, I chose the MBA. Some people choose like an MHA, Master of Health Administration, or an MPH, a Masters of Public Health.
Yeah.
I think it depends on where you see yourself, and you take a self-inventory and say, okay, what are my core strengths? What do I want to do? Do my strengths line up with what I want to do? If they do not, then what do I need to QS? What do I need to complement my core training with? So that I can pursue what I want to do. And for me, it was the MBA. And I have to tell you, it not only helped me out professionally, it helps me out personally too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do think it is unconventional for someone that's scientifically focused, but not totally uncommon. We see more and more of it now. But I'm glad to hear, to your point, it opened up a lot of doors, because obviously, you spent a lot of time getting, your education, getting an MBA, PharmD. So I'm glad it paid off. Now, so going back, how did you actually, you said these, obviously doors were open. So how did you actually transition to industry right in the beginning?
Well, interesting question. So once I got all my credentials, graduated with my PharmD, that was the final degree. I actually relocated to Virginia, where I am now, to work for a startup company. And that startup company had a lot of industry clients. And I was in a position with that company to be the liaison between the company and these industry clients. And I started getting to learn certain roles in industry, directors of medical affairs or professional services. They had different names back then. Medical affairs did. Clinical development. And so I was engaging with these people. And I guess and one of them was a good friend of mine through a mutual relationship through Kappa Psi Pharmaceutical Fraternity. So we were part of the same professional fraternity. And he said, your pharmacy background and business acumen would fit well in the industry. Would you ever consider working in the field? And at the time, he had an opening in cardiovascular. And he said, you want to work in the field? And I had no idea. I've always commuted to an office and had my little cubicle or office, whatever. And I had no idea what working in the field was about. And I kind of fell into it. He offered it to me. I trusted him. I said, and it came at a time where I needed something fresh to re-energize me. And I took it on.
So that was in field medical or field sales?
I was in field medical. So this was, that's another good question, because at the time, this was back before the pharma regulations came out in 2001.
Okay.
And the role that I took was clinical science specialist. It wasn't MSL. I know that even now companies have different names, regional medical liaison, regional medical director, what have you, but MSL is kind of the generic acronym, and it really embodies the lion's share of the job description that we look at in field-based medical. But clinical science specialist was the precursor to the MSL role. And really, when I look back, I'm in field-based medical now, and I know what it's like now, and the lanes that we have to stay in, and what we can say and what we can't say, proactively, reactively. And I compare that to when I started, and there were no guardrails, and the lines were very blurry.
Yeah.
And the Sunshine Act wasn't even
a thing
around. I don't even know if it was even an idea back then. So I have the unique perspective of knowing what it was for a brief while before the pharma regulations and the Sunshine Act came around. And now I know what it's like now. So yeah, it's very different. It was I would have to say the clinical science specialist role at that time was a commercial scientist.
Yeah. So
you
actually
coin that term.
You were like in the beginning stages of the MS. I mean, obviously first MSL was 1967 Upjohn. We kind of know the history, we know the story, but the evolution of the medical science liaison position really didn't start to kick in until late 90s, early 2000s, and then now we're seeing this major evolution and boom.
Explosion, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different. So you came up through that time period. Having a PharmD, having an MBA obviously opened a bunch of doors. Is that why, because you coined the title and the phrase for the title of this podcast, how an unconventional background, can lead to success, whatever. Like, is that why you think your background's unconventional? Because you had gotten, your degrees all at once? Or is it because you had played a bunch of different roles outside of being an MSL?
The unconventionality, and I can't remember the exact verbiage of the title of this.
The road less traveled.
I hope
you got all artistic on me.
So
the road.
Thank you. It's the path that I took. My background isn't so unconventional. I have to say, at the time, taking the initiative to get my MBA, then go on to get my PharmD, at that time when I did it, I was the exception and not the rule.
Definitely. Yeah, nobody did that back then.
Yeah, and so now you're seeing more and more of that, as you alluded to. So looking at my career path from that time when I first got into field-based medical in the late 90s, I've been in field-based medical. I've been in scientific communications on the vendor side of the business. I have actually had gap transitions back into retail pharmacy because of the business environment and timing and product failures, quite frankly, and surprise reorganizations and displacements and things of that nature. It used to be that the MSL role was much more secure than the sales role, because sales was always, as long as I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, sales has always had a lot of turnover. Territories reorganizing this territory, expanding over here, downsizing over here. Much less so to MSLs, because there are not as many MSLs as there are salespeople. But I've noticed, it seems that some companies have hundreds of MSLs. Nations, just in this country, never mind globally. Hundreds of MSLs, and I'm finding that depending on business objectives and things that MSLs aren't typically privy to, and things that they can't control, or even the company can't control, whether competition comes out or whatnot, those roles aren't as stable anymore. So there's another takeaway here in terms of going from field-based medical to a vendor role, to going back into field-based medical, to doing, national speaker. I'm kind of reflecting, and people can look at my LinkedIn profile and see this in black and white, but I've kind of bounced around. And in some cases, most cases, I have to explain that to a lot of people. But what that has done is it has made me. I look at my background now today, my LinkedIn profile, and I see two things. I see, maybe I'm biased. You're a top recruiter, but I see versatility and I see adaptability.
Okay.
And nothing's guaranteed in this professional life for sure, and even in your personal life. So your ability to acquire experiences and skill sets and kind of package them into a versatile, adaptable professional package yourself, I think is very valuable going forward.
So that's interesting, because I think that a lot of people wind up being forced to move from one role to the next role to the next role for different reasons. Like you said, acquisitions, product doesn't get approved. There's different things that happen. So there are people listening to this podcast that might have 3 or 4 different career changes or company changes on their CV, but they themselves didn't intend to be a job hopper, and they're not a job hopper. They just were affected that way. What you're saying is embrace it, try to explain the changes, but also use that as a positive to be able to say, hey, with me and my background comes a lot of adaptability, a lot of versatility, having to overcome and reinvent myself a little bit, maybe at a new company. But going back, do you think that it makes sense? Like, if there's someone who's looking to break into industry, you got into industry, kind of, maybe friend of a friend, word of mouth, you kind of fell into it. But if there's someone looking to break into industry, do you think it makes sense for them to consider starting in a role that's not an MSL role? Maybe it's in scientific communications. Maybe it's on the vendor side. Maybe it's clinical research. What's your thought on that?
Well, you touched on, that's how I kind of fell into it. I didn't have a direction, like I'm going to get back in the late 90s when I was a clinical science specialist, became a clinical science specialist, and I was working for that startup before. I didn't say I'm going to get into industry. It just kind of fell, in my lap, if you will, as you put it. But I think for those wanting to break into industry, this is a much better time period than it was when I, got out of school and started working, because now you have companies, large and small and everything in between, that are looking to leverage the talent pool, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. So we have, and I'm noticing on LinkedIn and other platforms, and even just by word of mouth, a lot of companies set up these internships, fellowships, externships in industry, and they may not be directly in medical affairs. They may be clinical development. They may be even med info within the industry, where there's a lot of scientific communication, maybe in publications. So looking at the peer-reviewed footprint for the company, and also the Congress and meeting footprint with posters and abstracts and whatnot. So if you can get into if you can't get right into a field-based medical role, don't be discouraged. Look at some of these other the other programs.
That's great advice.
The other to get involved in and actively also network with professionals who are currently in medical affairs, and do your best with networking. The old adage, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. So that certainly helps. And in the case, I knew that one individual who got me into field-based medical affairs way back when. And then look at these internships and externships and fellowships. Yeah, they may not be high-paying, highfalutin, but they're very valuable for you. It gives you a platform to prove yourself, gives you a platform to make connections internally directly with a company that you are working with or in. I say with now because there's not a lot of people going into the offices during these pandemics. So, but still, we can use this virtual platform for networking as well. Pick up the phone. Those are very valuable opportunities that can really kickstart your career in medical. And it's becoming more and more, just one last point, it's becoming more and more competitive as the talent pool expands
Mm-hmm.
seemingly exponentially, and more people, I'm getting pinged on LinkedIn all the time, emailed privately, hey, how can I break into this role? How can I break into that role? I was like, I didn't realize that many people were interested in this type of role.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you bring up a lot of really good points. I mean, to your point, yes, I do think it's a great time to try to transition into industry if you're trying to break in, because there are a lot of different things available now. First of all, there's more demand. There's more MSL positions available now. More companies are hiring MSLs, more expansions, larger teams. The need and the value proposition for field medical affairs has never been as strong as it is now. The challenge is it's also never been as competitive. There's never been as many people all trying to break in at the same time.
right.
So when you bring up things like fellowships and internships, yeah, that's great advice. It's just hard to get those. But to your point, networking is the great equalizer. We talk about that a lot. It's the great equalizer because if you insert yourself into the medical affairs community, you're networked with a lot of folks, and your background is consistent with what one of those folks may potentially need on their team. Well, guess what? They might say, oh yeah, I remember, I've talked to so-and-so, or I'm mentoring so-and-so.
Right. Right.
They might be a great fit for our team. Let me see if I can get the resume in front of the right people. Now, did stuff like that happen for you? Like, because I know that you've made, knowing your background and, looking at your LinkedIn profile, you made a bunch of different moves. Was more of your success through the relationships that you had, or was it through your efforts in your job search to just be really aggressive to apply to a bunch of things and put yourself in the right place at the right time?
So I would have to say, it's not as black and white for me. Certainly, I would have to say 2/3 was a result of my relationships and my reputation in the industry. And then the other third, the final third, was just my tenacity and drive and determination. As the job environment becomes more and more competitive, as you stated, you can't wait for people to reach out to you, and you can't always rely solely on your connections. You have to proactively immerse yourself in the discussion, bring yourself to the table. And in some cases, I would argue, even if you're uninvited, figuratively speaking, and just, don't be a nuisance, but, try to demonstrate your desire, your acumen, whether it be scientific or business or otherwise, and people will eventually take notice. It really has to do with, it's almost like KOL relationships, right? Thought leader relationships. The first time you've never met this particular KOL before, you're going in, you're trying to make a good first impression. And just as a tip for anyone currently in field-based medical or looking to get into field-based medical, don't always go into that initial meeting with a KOL for the first time saying, worried about your agenda. Okay, your agenda. Yes, it's very important that you have objectives, and trust me, KOLs know that. But if you go in and try to go in with the attitude that you want to understand the KOL's agenda and what their needs are,
right? And
they will create opportunities in that organic ensuing dialogue. And there's an art to being an MSL, and that's probably a whole nother podcast that you probably have already posted. But there's an art to this, and I'm still refining it after 2 decades. But they will, in that organic dialogue, they will create opportunities for you to insert your agenda or insert your information, rather than, because you put them on the defensive a lot of times. It's like, all right, what kind of messages do I have to listen to before I can get to what I want to talk about?
Yep.
Right. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I was just about to ask, as we're talking about your career evolution and your success, and what you've been able to accomplish over the course of these years. I was going to ask you, what advice would you give your younger self, or what advice would you give to a current MSL that's trying to establish their career? Obviously, you gave us one really good tidbit with your approach to KOLs, and maybe focus more on the KOL needs and uncovering their needs, and then working your agenda in, as opposed to just going in with your agenda. What else? I mean, what other secrets to the biz can you offer, Mr. Bernaducci, Dr. Bernaducci?
It's all right. Mr. Doctor, Dr. Mister. I would say a couple of things. Patience is a virtue, certainly in your job search and finding that ideal position. Just be patient. You may be thinking you're putting your best foot forward and somehow it doesn't bear fruit. It's not always your fault, as the job seeker. There are things you probably don't know about and circumstances you don't know about. Hiring freezes because of COVID and everything else. I experienced that as well. So be patient. The other is be coachable. Once you're in the role, be coachable, have a bit of a thick skin. Okay. And I know that may be tough for people, certainly who just break into their first real role after academia, where the teacher-student relationship is much different than the boss-subordinate relationship. And sometimes it can be a difficult transition, mentally, emotionally. And just be a little bit thick-skinned. Understand that not everything is personal. There are overarching business objectives and again, things and nuances you may not know, or what might be happening above your boss and even higher, that he or she may be protecting you from or shielding you from, and just trying to help you focus and be the best performer you can be at your role, so that in the future you may get looks for promotion or what have you, or progression. So, be coachable, be patient.
And I'll tell you, the MSL role is complicated. It's tricky. It's complicated. There's so many nuances to it. I kind of feel like you almost have to be coachable. I feel like if you're not coachable, you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's so important to learn from others around you, including your direct supervisors, but also your teammates and folks that are in a position where they can help you evolve, in your career and help kind of point out how you can get better.
Yeah. It's sometimes I have to step back. I just pause for thought there, because I think there's another tidbit here for us. As I mentioned, I have nearly 20 years of experience in field-based medical, and it's very easy to think after 20 years that I've got this down pat. I know what I'm doing, and and I've made mistakes. I think the way in which you grow is you learn from those mistakes. I've mentored less experienced MSLs in the past. I've led teams in the past, and without making mistakes, I don't think I could be a good mentor and a good guide for someone who wants to break in to industry, or wants field-based medical, or who wants to progress in industry. So, I have to taste my own medicine sometimes, and sometimes I have to sit back and say, even after 2 decades, I don't know everything. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I don't know a lot about right now, but I'm eager to learn, is this new digital platform. We're doing a podcast here. So this is the new platform. And this is the new platform now through which KOLs can be accessed and through which KOLs are influencing now. And I know, less about how to influence the digital influencers, if you will, and how to leverage the digital platforms to advance, company objectives or employer objectives. So this is something that I am open to learning right now, and I'm learning a little bit every day, and participating in things like this help me learn as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and we learn, just like you said, we learn from our mistakes. We all get humbled a little bit. And we don't
Yeah,
know everything because everything's changing so fast. I mean, to your point,
this is true.
we're in this unprecedented time right now with COVID and everything else. And we're all figuring this out, which was going to be my next
Yeah.
question. You're leading me right down the path to my next question. So, looking at it's December, right? We're looking straight into 2021. Everybody can't wait to put 2020 behind us. How do you prepare for what's next? How do you prepare for the next, hopefully final phase of COVID, and then the transition back to what hopefully might be the old normal, which would be live, engagement, live interaction. So what's your advice to folks as they move into 2021 MSLs?
My advice to folks, certainly who are already in, so you're already in industry and looking to transition into 2021 is understand that appreciate the possibility that it may not ever get back to the old normal.
Okay.
All right. It may not ever get back there as much as we want it to get back there. I think there are some things that may stay. I don't think we'll be doing as much virtual engagement as we're doing now, but I think we might see more of it.
Yeah.
Being used for certain opportunities and certain objectives. I think also this COVID pandemic has forced us not only to think virtually, but how do we influence digitally?
Yeah.
Because, this virtual environment, this is technology. Well, and industry was doing this before, but it kind of, industry, in my view, kind of got slapped in the face with this. And now all of a sudden we got to go from one-on-one, face-to-face and convening at congresses to how do we conduct these engagements efficiently and effectively with digital technology. And industry is, I'm not going to lie, industry is looking at this because there are economies of scale here that can be achieved where costs can be reduced while not compromising the outcome. So I would not rush forward in 2021 saying, yeah, I got vaccinated and I'm okay and things are going to be back to normal. It's the healthcare institutions that we, if you work in institutions a lot, they already have vendor mate and all these other, where you had to have your flu vaccine, you had to have all these check boxes before you could even see somebody. That's going to change too. Probably going to incorporate some COVID stuff. They're probably going to have some sort of protocol in place that is a spillover from what protocols they currently have in place during this pandemic. So just be open-minded, roll with the punches, and do the best you can in the new normal. I'm not so sure it's going to get back to the old normal. I'd love it to get back to the old normal. That's my comfort zone. So biggest tidbit. Biggest tidbit. Don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone every once in a while.
That's a good one,
especially
man.
Now.
And listen, if 2020 taught us anything, we had no choice. We all were thrown out of our comfort zone. We're going back to your original, honestly, one of your original points was adaptability and the importance of adaptability. I think we've all had a lesson in it in 2020, but what you're saying is be prepared to continue to be adaptable and maybe get some new lessons because we don't know what's in store.
We don't know the future. So just be nimble, be adaptable, make yourself versatile so that maybe going out of your comfort zone isn't so intimidating because you could say, oh, I did a little bit of that in my past. I can handle this, I think, with a little bit of guidance and mentorship in the beginning, and then I can be off to the races. So, I've been blessed. I've been lucky, mistakes, net, I come out on top. I feel I have. I hope that what we've shared here on this platform helps others.
No doubt, man. You're awesome. Listen, man, like I said, we go back a long way. I couldn't wait to have you come on.
Yeah.
And you did not disappoint. Tremendous advice. I appreciate you. And I know everybody else does. So thanks so much for coming on. Happy holidays, man. Enjoy it. Stay healthy.
Happy holidays to you. And thank you very much, Tom. All right,
buddy.
Take care.
Talk soon. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.